Everyone loves the mythological Vikings, right? Those horned helmet wearing blonde fighting gods from the lands of ice and snow, fearless in battle as they wanted to be killed in combat, not of old age, because only then could they go to the halls of Valhalla and feast with Odin, ready to be called upon during Ragnarok. We've all seen and heard the stories. Even to this day, we get computer games, movies, TV shows, board games, novels about the peoples of Scandinavia during the Dark Ages. They transformed my country a load after they decided to frustrate us for our riches we had acquired from trade, and after a full-on settlement invasion that forced our hand into creating a standing army which basically drove out the Vikings from the east of England. They all but basically began to die out until 1066 when the French Vikings conquered England once and for all, and then we basically become an all-conquering empire, right? The biggest ever known. You've gotta love what we did as a country. Name any other one we beat 'em, right? To quote a famous Al Murray sketch. Most of us English folk tend to love our Viking ancestors in that mythological sense, though. We tend to overlook the raiding, pillaging, and other R words like ransoming. Yep, I'm not getting demonetised, but we do overlook the brutality of a more technologically advanced, combat proficient army of invaders who just popped up and took whatever they pleased. I wonder why. But this game right here lets you live out your mythological Scandinavian fantasies of going a Viking over the seas, building up your crew with a very good worker placement system, and that is why I've given Raiders of the North Sea a 4 out of 5. So gameplay for this one is pretty simple. You start off with a worker token that's black in colour and a hand of 5 cards, which needs to be whittled down to 3 by your choice of potential crew members. The board in front of you is the land you will raid. It has the highest value targets up the top, which are fortresses, gradually decreasing in toughness to monasteries, outposts and harbours. All of these areas are full of plunder, which you can get to spend on upgrades for your raiding party with better crew, upgrade your armor value, which means you have advantages on raids, or purchase offering tokens that give you bonus points at the end of the game. This one is very simple to play and learn. Place a token on one of the homeland buildings and get a reward. The colour of your token gets you different rewards. Most of the time the rewards are better as you go up to the grey and then white worker meeples, but sometimes the black meeples get better rewards, like in the case of earning coins. But there are also a couple of places where only grey and white meeples can be placed. The buildings available are the Gatehouse, which lets you draw 2 cards for your Ond, Town Hall, which lets you use the blue symbols on the bottom of one of your cards in Ond, Treasury lets you get rid of either 1 or 2 cards to earn 3 coins or a gold piece, the Mill lets you earn rations for you to use for raiding, the Barracks lets you recruit a crew member from your Ond of cards so long as you pay the required cost. The Silversmith earns you coins. The Armory is the place you spend coins or silver to upgrade your armor rating. And lastly, the Lunghouse is where you spend either your cars or rations, or you spend the required offerings to get one of the offering tokens. As soon as you've placed your meeples though, you then pick another one back up from another place that's on the board and also earn that reward, with you constantly going back and forth earning 2 sets of rewards until you've gained enough to go out on a raid. Each location has a random amount of loot based on the number on the board that you drew at random from the loot bag at the beginning of the game. The items of loot you can acquire are gold, silver, cars, better coloured meeple workers, and lastly Valkyries. If the location you're raiding has a Valkyrie, it means one of your crew will have to die, but you do gain 1 point on the Valkyrie track. Now, there are 3 tracks which earn you points to win the game. One is the armour number, one is the Valkyries, and lastly, it's your raid points. Whenever you raid, you earn a certain number of points depending on the strength of location, and along with your offering points, the one with the most at the end of the game wins. So it's a race basically, with endgame only triggering when you have raided all but one of the fortresses, all Valkyrie tokens are removed from the board, or there are no offering tokens in the pile. Now, of course, raid spaces have certain numbers you have to beat to actually raid them, and the tougher the defences, the bigger the numbers. Your crew have a strength number on them, and so you'll add up all your crew numbers and shield number to get your total strength value. You, of course, also need a set number of provisions and crew to also actually go on a raid, but some of the tougher locations do let you roll 1 or 2d6 to add to your overall total also, and depending on how well you did, the more points you got. And that's kind of the gameplay in a nutshell. There's not a lot to learn as its base form, but it is extremely tactical, as you don't ever want to be in a position where you waste a turn doing nout, but placing or collecting a meeple. And you also don't want to waste the more valuable grey and white meeples on useless reds or base positions. There is a heavy focus here on planning out your moves, filling out your crew, and collecting enough rations. There is a max number you can collect for everything, so you will have to raid at some point or watch what you're getting for your rewards, but mostly the game flows fast and you don't have to read the rulebook after the first time. It's very intuitive, and getting a game which you can play on the table with setup in under an hour is amazing, especially for someone like me who only tends to play in an afternoon when I've fetched the kids from school. The game in its best form is just fun to table and play. There are 2 extra expansions you can buy for this. One adds quests and yarls for you to kill or subdue. The other adds mead and the Hall of Heroes, which I believe add to your crew. But not only are those expansions hard to get hold of, along with them being a tad bit expensive, they add on extra faff for me, which would increase setup time and add another layer of complexity to the system. If that's what you like, then they exist for you. I've heard they are essential to make this game truly great, but I disagree. For me, this game works as a simple and quick worker placement points gaining system. If you add on extra faff, you're adding more things to keep track of and hence more things to get wrong, and that for me isn't essential when the base game is good enough for you. And to quote the amazing Todd Howard, just works. The only expansion that's worth getting for me is the solo mode cards. Yes, unfortunately, the base game don't come with a solo mode. You have to buy extra cards, and I, in all honesty, got lucky. They popped up on eBay with the base game for 38 quid. That's how much I paid for this, when base game alone usually costs 40 quid, and the cards are ultra rare, often near impossible to find. But they do have an app specifically for the solo mode that costs £3.50 on phones and tablets if you could ever find them anywhere, and the solo mode here is great. I only play solo. I am a solo only player after all, and the Shembot, as it's been labelled, is one tough son of a gun. It acts like a human player for the most part. It don't place tokens. It instead blocks off one placement area, usually the one you want. It raids and takes plunder. It gains points on everything like the shield and Valkyrie track, and I've only beaten it once. You really do get better at the game the more you play against the bot, because it really hurries you along. Your decision making has to be spot on, and as someone who was new to worker placement games, this was my first after all. It really has given me some great tactical knowledge to the system. This is by far one of the best bots I've played against, especially as it does seem to cheat, and you actually feel like you have more options with choices on the board and in your raid zones to win. You don't ever feel like you have to play just one way and cheese the system to win, like I feel happens with other bot systems I've gone against. Dune Imperium. More on that one soon when I do the review. Now here, you really do benefit from learning the game and its little intricacies, and so I recommend the solo bot enough. For me, it's the only expansion worth the extra fee, however you obtain it. But let's now talk negatives, and the first I have with this game is the huge deck of possible crew. Now, the artwork on the deck is amazing. All the potential crew have absolutely great cartoony custom features that make them unique. There are warlords, gravediggers, shield maidens, berserkers, gatekeepers, anyone you can think of from the Viking Age is represented here, sometimes multiple times, but I have found the deck way too big. As a solo player, you max see about 15 or 20 cards in a deck that has about 80, maybe even more, and sometimes it can be a detriment to the game and your tactical thought process. Yes, I would sometimes like that one card that I found really useful before more often. There are a few must-takes here after all, but sometimes you can get an absolute bunch of useless duds who couldn't batter a fish, let alone an outpost, and what happens is you get stuck at home base, constantly going to the gatehouse to get new cards and throwing others away, wasting turns while the bot blitzes further and further away. It's not something that happens all the while, but with such a big deck and luck being involved, it is something which can make you shrug your shoulders and huff and puff, especially if the Shembot blocks off the area to get rid of your useless cards, because every card has a passive ability which can give you bonuses during raids, let you draw 3 cards from the gate or let you buy crew members for a coin cheaper. And they also have the blue ability which lets you steal plunder from your opponents or gain a resource. There's a lot of useful abilities here you can use at various points to help you to win. The Berserker is one of my favourites as they have great strength for their cost ratio, and upon death at the hands of Valkyries, they don't leave your party, only your crew, as they get placed back into your hand of cards. And so, yes, you can pay for them 2 or 3 times again, but it does mean you can chase more Valkyrie tokens down to give you another bonus rather than just ejecting useless crew all the while. But that deck and its size can be very random, and it does have the possibility to ruin your plans. The second negative I have is with the starts. Basically, you will always just get coins or rations, and then visit the gatehouse to see what cards you can fish out of the large deck for potential crew. And that is basically all you do until you're ready to hire your crew and go raiding. And it's not until your first or maybe even second raid in the game that it really opens up and gives you great options. You really do feel like an AI yourself when you start the game. It's like engaging autopilot in Airplane. A blow-up doll pops up beside you and you just let it take control for the first 4 to 6 turns depending on what the Shembot blocks off. Starts are tedious and very much samey because there's only so many places you can go that don't have a meeple already on them in the beginning or allow black meeples to be placed at. And so your strategy at the beginning of the game is always the same. There's no other way to play to get started in this, and it is very disappointing going through the same old motions until, like I said, you've done 1 or maybe even 2 raids and the board and tactics open up. And it's because of that I also don't think this will be great at 3 or 4 players, especially if they don't know what they're doing, as I can see people really stalling and thinking profusely about where they will place the meeples and raid, and your options will be more limited in terms of board placement and random card draws on the crew market deck. Now, this is a 1 to 2 player game for me, so you can keep it just under an hour, have a tad bit less randomness. There's still going to be some there, but I can see 1 player in a 3 or 4 player game getting a bit of luck and just blitzing everything right if the others don't have the right cards in their hand. So that is pretty much it. This easily earns its 4 out of 5 rating as a solo player. It's a game I have a great time playing. The artwork is great, the mechanics are easy to learn and teach, and it's a ton of fun for me that gets to the table and back in the box in an hour or just over. I've described the faults I can see in the system. They don't bother myself greatly. I can switch them off, but others might not like it. For me, though, I can see this going high on my games of all time list at the end of the year, and I recommend you check it out either in this form or digitally, which is on Steam and is highly rated, has the solo mode built into the system, and is vastly cheaper at 10 quid. So check it out if you want, and thanks for watching.